we've had quite the journey. We haven't quite clocked up the rail miles of Bruno in this conference, but I certainly feel like I've been on quite a journey with you all. Beginning yesterday, heard a lot of good examples. The challenge of a conference, even a conference with great coffee breaks, which is the most important thing, of course, for the networking, great breakout sessions and great plenaries, lots of interesting things. What's the next step? How do we make sure that we sum it all up and have clear ideas of what we should take forward? And a lot of the times we think about what are the solutions, what have we found that we can implement? And sometimes it's, like we said in the beginning, it's sometimes we look for the best practice and we ignore the worst practice, the things that maybe we can learn as much from. And maybe we should look as much at challenges and questions as we do at solutions. So what are the better questions that we have? What are the better challenges that we face or we want to face after the conference? So what are we going to do now to close? How do we sum up something as dynamic as this conference? Well, the idea is that we're going to invite a group of people who've attended to just reflect on what they've seen, what they've heard, and what it means for the future of participatory democracy. And I'm going to invite them in pairs to come up on stage and just give sort of 5 minutes, roughly 5 minutes each, to just reflect on what have you heard, what have you seen, and what does it mean. And I'd like to start with Shari Davis and Coline Berthaud to come up and talk about their thoughts. What have you experienced and what are your hopes for the future? There we go.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank again SALAR for the organization of the whole thing. It was very well organized and very interesting. We will come back, each and every one, with very good ideas, and I hope that some of them will be implemented. So, what did I learn in those 2 days? First, I think we are all coping with a crisis of democracy. We are all aware of this, and we have to fight for populism. And someone said, doing nothing is not an option. I think we are all aware of that, so we have to deal with this situation, and citizen participation is one of the ways to struggle against populism. Somebody already said we have to do something, we have to work for, not work for people, but work with people. I think it's another lesson for those 2 days, and we have to do it properly, because if we do citizen participation but bad, it's worse than doing nothing. So we have to do it properly. And to do it properly, we have to be transparent of what we are doing in all circumstances. Citizen participation has to be inclusive. I think it's one of the other lessons of these 2 days. We have to let no one apart from citizen participation, and to address to people who are not so hard to reach, but so easy to ignore. I love this expression, and I will take it into my mind, because I think it's very important to have it in mind. They are not so hard to reach, but so easy to ignore.
Thank you. Sure.
Well, Colin just took everything I was going to say. So one of the things that is really standing out to me, though, especially in this moment, is that I need to talk to Colin more. And the beautiful thing about being in this conference, and Josh knows this, is as soon as I got here, I said, you know who's going to be my best friend? It's the person that's working in Paris that's leading this amazing participatory budgeting process. And you don't know this, but we're friends now. And I think that is the bigger takeaway, especially with our last speaker. What I heard was that we do need to talk to each other more. And in this room right now, there are so many doers, and I would love to be able to tell your story. I would love to be able for you guys to share in the stories that we're telling, not only in the city of Boston, but across the United States. And so one thing that I want to walk away from this conference and make really clear to you all is that at the Participatory Budgeting Project, one of our visions for the future is that this conversation doesn't end here today, and that as we move forward in sometimes the impossible and what feels like the impossible work of reshaping the way that we practice democracy, we need to do this more. And so I invite you guys to visit our website that has a ton of free resources that we know you're not going to use exactly the same way that we do, but will be an opportunity for you to adapt and innovate. We'd love to tell your story more. And that means that you can connect with us on our website at theparticipatorybudgeting.org. And with that said, please do reach out to us and let's continue this conversation. I'm walking away with not only one friend, but many. And I think that in order for us to reshape the work that we're doing and continue to innovate, we have to do that together.
Thank you. So I think two key points for me, Coline, this idea about the really good, I agree, it's a really good phrase, the easy to ignore. That the language we use and the perspective that we have is really important. And turning it on its head, which a lot of people have talked about, doing with and not for, and it's really challenging. We had the pyramid up on the picture yesterday, and how do we shift from being this hierarchical organization that looks out and say, oh, they're really hard to reach, from my perspective, into the other side. And then, Shari, what you mentioned about the need for friendships, talking, and also picking up on that other thing which was mentioned, storytelling. So maybe I said you should walk out of this room with better questions and challenges, and you probably should have better stories as well. And so we talk a lot about what we take out of the room. You know, we pack our bags full of things from the conference. And as we all know, you can only fill your bags so much with new things to do. So we have to stop doing certain things if we're going to do new things. Do you have any thoughts on what we need to stop doing in democracy in the future?
I will always quote someone. Someone said, leadership is not having power, it's sharing power. And I think it's the main lesson of the 2 days. It's leaders have to stop to think that they have to decide everything, and think that their decision will be better if they listen to public. So I think it's the main thing to retain.
Yeah, so that's sharing power, which takes bravery and a new way of thinking.
Something that we have to stop doing, this is a hard question for me to answer because I have a lot of things to say, but I will say this. One thing that I encounter a lot is people struggle with the moment in which to begin. And that moment was yesterday. And so we have to stop waiting to have the conversation, waiting to reach out. And I'll make you guys a promise now. Like I said, we want to tell your story. We want to lift that up in blog posts. We want to have webinars with you. And I believe that that's how we change this on a global scale. We have to stop waiting.
So I'm going to take that and turn it into a direct call to action, which is also something we talked about yesterday, that if you have a sort of nagging thought, maybe I should contact someone that I've met here today sometime in the future, do it. Do it now. Go and meet them before they leave. If you don't catch them, email them right away so that you, being the grandson of a blacksmith, strike while the iron is hot, because we have great intentions which end up in this notebook, and then they don't happen because we wait. So thank you both so much for your input. So just put them there. And then I would like to invite Yves Cabannes and Susan Ritchie to the stage. So once again, obviously, your thoughts, what have you learnt and what are your thoughts about the future?
Well, just being on the stage with Yves Cabannes is a highlight of my 2 days, because we use all your academic work in our training, so it's great to meet you in person. Thank you. I guess the few things I was reflecting on is some of the themes that have come through for me are about the lack of trust and the disconnectivity that goes on in society. That's both within communities and the disconnection between communities and the governance that structures that are there to help promote democracy. So I see that all the time in my practice, and there was just, sort of, I guess, a bit reaffirming to be here and see that everybody else is feeling that too. I really like I normally take a phrase away from a conference, and I've heard easy to ignore lots of times and use it. So the phrase that I'm taking away is that, and I can't remember who said it now, but it was about us being able to castrate and vandalise creativity really easily. And I think with my work in the UK, I see people who want to do that all the time, to stop the creativity. They'd much rather a more formal meeting rather than allowing people to be creative and sort of share those ideas in a much better space. And related to that then is, I think we talk about independent facilitation quite a lot. And there's just in the last 5 minutes, I thought, is it really independent facilitation that we need, or should we rephrase that to independent listeners when we're working with the public sector? Because for me, the public sector is a bit more attuned now. You mentioned that yesterday, that your mum and dad still might not know what you do, and neither would mine or my family really. But actually the public sector do know what we do now, and I think they do value it out of a crisis of funding, etc. But I still think that they're not quite ready to invest the time in that process. And I think what we've heard over the last few days is relationship building really takes quite a lot of time. And the devil's in the detail, so giving some time to people and really valuing them. You can't do in one meeting of 2 hours or a survey or, those more traditional ways. So if we are genuinely going to do co-production, that means we do need to have that time with people, adapt to their circumstances, but also adapt our systems to their circumstances, not just for the process of facilitation, but the outcome of that. How do we adapt? Which is one of the key principles of success for participatory budgeting too. I think our public sector in the UK are very egotistical in some ways. I don't think they always reflect on the nature of service. So somebody said to me, the problem with you, Sue, is you still think of people as public servants. They think of themselves as public officials. And I thought, okay, that's something for me to reflect on. But the one big thing, when I say I take phrases away, Giovanni, I don't know where he is now, but at the last Scottish PB conference, the thing that I took away from that, which I loved, was you said, don't decaffeinate PB. And I guess the same is true for any form of participation, not to decaffeinate that. And then the other thing that struck me the last couple of days is we ought to remember we're not good enough. And we've got a culture in the UK of case studies, awards. Let's all tell everybody we're fantastic. But if we started to recognise more about how we're not good enough and what we need to do to get better, I think we could start to change that culture. Fantastic. Thank you, Sue. I mean,
I also think that the caffeinating is a really interesting thing. And why is it that for many of us, democracy and formality is the same thing? That if it's a democratic meeting, it also has to be quite boring. So I think that's worth thinking about. What preconceived notions do we go in with? Yves?
All right. After listening to my predecessors and Bruno, I really feel very more energized than ever. And I think that was very good. You need energy to continue struggling, to continue discussing. Here are a couple of reflections. The first one, I was very pleased the first hour when I heard that it's important, there's the need to discuss, a need to have dialogue, to have face-to-face. I remember it was one of the mayors. And then I realized suddenly through all this digital age of which I wasn't part of when I started being an activist in PB, that we are in a digital age, plenty of platforms, digital voting, etc. And I hope that we'll keep deliberating, that we'll keep being with dissensus, that we'll keep face-to-face. I spent hundreds of thousands of hours discussing, and this is what changed me. I'm not sure that SMS and digital democracy is a solution. I think that in our democracy we have been hijacked the voice. And democracy is not about vote, it's about voice. And PB is an added value for that. So I hope that we'll find a balance between digital and deliberation. The second thing is that we didn't speak about enough money. And I remember George saying real money, real power. And what I see is that the money that is being discussed is very low. And I mean, along what you say, I'm impatient to have us as people controlling more public money because it's ours. And we cannot be simply saying that participatory budgeting and democracy, it's about only the participatory side. I see this budgetary like one big necessity. It's every day, every year, less and less money being discussed. I think that in relation with what I heard, I was amazed of listening to Luton and Lewisham and I mean so many of the cities. And all through these years, in these 30 years involved, I've been seeing many PB disappearing. Many of the fantastic stories we heard, which have not been documented. And we are invisible. And we are invisible. 30 years struggling, there is not a political agenda on PB. If you look at the new urban agenda, look for the word participatory budgeting. There are thousands of cities with participatory budgeting, not one word. If you look at what the United Cities and local government, all over the world, all the commissions together, not one political commitment that this is important about democracy. So we haven't been winning this battle. And my impatience, and that's why it's so good to be at SALAR and to be with you, because plenty of you are decision makers, political agenda makers. So we don't have a political agenda. It is not. Internationally, we are not visible. And that's, for me, very, very sad. And the last part I just wanted to share with you is this, very convinced after listening to what I heard today that PB is really today about changing people that can change cities. And we need a lot of education and not avoid money, and spend money on civic education, youth education, because this is probably the best bet that we can have. I mean, because the people are going to change the cities, not necessarily PB as such. That would be what I've been listening here. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. If I were to sum up the kind of what you said in one word, I guess it would be voice. The importance of voice in terms of the discussions here today, in terms of a larger voice for citizens by increasing the amount of money we're talking about. But also the fact that, as you said, great processes happen and sometimes they disappear. And that's sad. But if we don't vocalize, give them a voice and a story, then it's a tragedy. Yeah. And so there's a real challenge there to make sure it's not enough that we go out there and do good work. We have to tell that story.
And I think that Bruno, in that sense, I mean, it was the best end. I mean, we need hundreds of Bruno. You know, that's a fantastic case. Yes, indeed, because there are 3,000, 4,000 per year participatory budgeting plus all the innovations you have. And how many do we know? How many are stored to strengthen us, to see that we are not alone? I mean, if it was not this meeting. And this is a need for media, for the academy, recently in the academy, to document, to have students involved, to be on the site, to translate. I was speaking with Indonesian Ahmed. Thousands of cases in Indonesia. Said, do you have a mayor who could speak? Said, most of them don't speak. They speak Indonesian. They don't document. You go to Korea, plenty of experience, all in Korean. Russia, same. So if we want to be global, to face the global system, we need to have means to communicate and document. What's happening in Korea is fantastic. We heard Seoul, and there are plenty of other cities. We don't know what's happening because of language barrier, and English is not the solution.
Yeah. So, a quick question just for both of you. Just very quickly, if you could change one thing about how democracy works today, big or small, what would it be?
I would definitely build on what you just said about that call for PB being in every state. And because I think what I've heard, certainly from my own practice, the practice of wider PB, your research, what we've heard here today is that PB is the jewel in the crown when you do participation, because there's a budget attached to that and it galvanises people, and because there's the outreach process that you have to go through in order to get the very easy to ignore in that process. I think if PB was there somewhere as a way of making a direct connection to democracy by the governments, then I think we would see a difference.
Yeah.
So you changed it by making sure that PB was in every...
Very explicit
yeah.
in every, and maybe, you know, we've tried to influence that through open government partnership. I mean, a few years ago, I remember putting a case forward for the Westminster Open Government Partnership Plan, and there was an interest, but they never took it any further. And I think that's maybe, I think I probably got deflated and thought, you know, but perhaps I shouldn't get deflated, perhaps I should get re-energised, which is the reason I came to this conference, and it has re-energised me. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
I would say listen to the people, dissent, and accept the dissenses. I mean, it's better to be wrong experimenting than right doing nothing, you know. So that you think it would help a little bit?
So it's one of those small but very difficult changes, to listen more and admit that you're wrong.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, both of you. And now we have our third pair. I'd like to invite Anna Sukhova and Peter Demediuk. Sorry, Peter, I keep doing that. Welcome up stage. There we go.
Thank you.
So, Peter,
Thank you.
What is the correct way to pronounce your name, now that I've managed to butcher it?
Demediuk.
Demediuk.
Half a duke, half royalty.
Fantastic. So, what are your thoughts about the future of public participation, having been to this conference this last day and a half?
Okay, first of all, I would take this opportunity to say thank you for the organizers for this fantastic event. I know that you needed to have lots of efforts to organize this event, but for me it was super balanced. Here you have lots of politicians and experts as well. People from different countries and people from local authorities. You had a great balance of coffee breaks when we had the opportunity to talk to each other, and very interesting and great sessions. So thank you very much once again. I'm proud to be here and to be a part of this great event. As for my takeaways, I liked that Joanna said in our first session that don't be afraid, don't think that you're unique. Don't think you have lots of problems that other people don't have in other countries. No. And I would add that don't afraid to try. Don't afraid to convince the first person in your country that will be so courage to try to implement participatory budgeting. And then it will work like a snowball. You will have lots of people that will see the results and that would like to implement participatory budgeting in their locality, in their territory. And as for the future, I think that we should focus on two things: on people and on trust. If we will talk about people, all of us know that it is rather difficult to engage people in any participatory processes. It is difficult at the first stage, but it is difficult because it's not so easy to change mindset of the population. But why we don't try to start from children? I think that we need to try and engage children, and then they will be well educated to be participatory, to be active citizens. So this is the first one. And for the trust, yes, we need to try to establish this trust between people, between citizens, and between authorities and population as well. And this is, for me, this is two core things that we should work on in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's a really interesting challenge about the children, that oftentimes maybe we think about citizens as that something when you turn 18, then you become a citizen, or whenever the voting age is. And that's probably far too late. And that there's a real interesting challenge there about when we think about participation, democracy, participatory budgeting, are we automatically excluding people under a certain age because we think, oh, you know, privacy concerns, child protection, or they're not up to it. So really interesting.
Children are now our future.
Yeah, really important. Thank you. Peter?
Now I've got g'day. I'm an Australian, so I have to say g'day. I'm an accountant. That's a confession, so don't hold that against me. But accounting means telling a story. That's the literal meaning of accounting, telling a story. And the beautiful thing about this conference for me was listening to the stories, very powerful stories, and trying to learn from those. So I've got a few comments to make, a few C words that came out for me from the conference. One was about commitment, that the incredible commitment that people have got in what they do, in their practices, the stories about how people have tried to go out to the community, organise participative events, and yet in the background there's the notion that perhaps a lot of politicians, a lot of managers are pushing back. They're uncertain about participation, it doesn't quite fit. So I think one lesson is that, yes, we need commitment, but it has to be really integral in the organisation. And I can give you one example from Australia. The City of Melbourne has put out a new plan, and they've got a mission, vision, goals, objectives, and one clear goal is to be a deliberative city. That's a goal, a deliberative city. And it says, we will have participation in decision making. We will get marginal groups to participate. We will use the latest IT devices. And what that does is, I think, it's like Mannheim, who I heard before, they've got such a strong declaration about how people will live together. And Australians aren't used to strong declarations. We're laid back. We're no worries. So that's a really big thing for this council to say, we're going to make this so explicit. No politician, no manager who pushes back can be shielded from it. So I think commitment is something that really comes out from this conference, but maybe sometimes it has to be more explicit in our plans, in our 5-year plans, in our values. The other thing I came out with was collaboration. And I think the New York model, if I'm not mistaken, has got a fair bit of collaboration in it. That it's not about civil servants going out and doing all the work, consultants doing all the work. I think people contribute. The community is part of the organisation. And in Australia, there's a couple of good examples of that in terms of collaboration. There's a big problem with refugees and migrants fitting into the community. There's a local government called Shepparton, 65,000 people, quite a poor council. Australian local governments have nothing like the funds of Swedish local governments to act. So what Shepparton said was, we need to help these children feel they're included. Not integrate, they don't use that word, it's inclusion. We have to make these children feel included. How can we do that? We don't have the funds for a team of participative people within the council. We don't have that sort of money operationally. So they approached the sporting clubs. They approached the Rotary clubs. And as an example, the local cricket club advertised through their own networks that they'd hold particular games for the new migrant kids and their parents. The City Council provided a bit of money for advertising. They had big TV signs around the city saying, come along. The cricket club, in turn, got funding for this from their Central Cricket Authority, and all the local government did was pay for the sausages. Now, that's a way of using inclusion, and there's 2 layers of participation there. The local clubs are involved, and you obviously get the young kids, the migrant kids, to participate. Another example of participation, the City of Melbourne, an extremely wealthy city, had got my MBA students, because I work in the middle of the city, to go out and talk to local businesses about their social impact. How can they improve their social impact? And there's 2 layers of participation there. the students participate, and local businesses are connected with the community. And once again, it costs them almost no money. So I think a key is to try to collaborate with people and share resources. Another quick one is cost. If you haven't got enough money, what was about power? The statement we made about anyway, that if you don't put money into it, it's not going to be a powerful message. The City of Melbourne have decided they're willing to go from a AAA credit rating to a AA credit rating in order to get enough borrowed money so that when they do the participative initiatives, they'll be substantial. They're actually going to try to make them big events, not small events. I think it's a pretty brave thing to do. And the last thing I wanted to mention was coercion. That just this month, legislation's coming through that will make each local government have participation in decision making about their plan and their budget. Now, that's a big task because a lot of councils are moving from a very low base of participation. They have to demonstrate a nexus between the decisions they make on their plan, the decisions they make on their budget, and how the participation affected those. So it's very interesting. Is there a need for central governments to mandate local governments to bring in participation? Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's really interesting because in a way, the issue of commitment touches on what we talked about, bravery in the early stages. And this idea of, and what Coline said about the fact that if we do this, we have to do it well. So be ambitious, but then make sure you can deliver. And then you mentioned collaboration, which comes back to the other thing which keeps popping up, which is humility. Acknowledge we can't do it all ourselves. And how, and in a way that's a solution, because some councillors might say we can't do this big commitment because we don't have resources. Well, maybe you don't have to, as you said. You can ask others to do that.
Well, there's another great example about that, the City of Melbourne decided they wanted to reach marginalised groups, and someone said before, they're not that hard to find, they're just easy to ignore. And they sent some people out at very low cost to do pop-ups, to talk to people. They actually talked to the homeless people. And as a result, the homeless in Melbourne now are getting their own lockers to store what meagre belongings they've got. Low cost. Lockers don't cost much money. It didn't cost much money to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, you've now been in Sweden, and I know, Peter, you've been here before, interacted with some of the local government. Picking up on sort of Bruno's point about the need to learn from each other and looking for unexpected lessons from places you might not look. Russia, Australia, do you have practical experiences, things that really work, that you think that the Swedish local government colleagues should try? And I know you've probably mentioned a few. But any sort of practical top tips that you could implement quite easily?
I'm under pressure. Yeah, look, I think it's just working with clubs, working with societies, because people want to do good. I mean, the people in the cricket clubs in Shepparton had a vested interest in getting more players. So that's part of the reason they happen to be involved. But people just want to do good things. And often they're looking for an avenue where they can help. They don't know how to volunteer. And if a local government presents an opportunity to a group of people, a sporting club, maybe they'll take it up.
And I'm touched by thinking about the idea of facilitation, which has popped up, that maybe it's making those connections, not doing it yourself.
Yeah.
Anna?
When we started our participatory budgeting in Russia 10 years ago, what was very important at that stage is to showcase good examples from our country. People were not listening to us when we showed them examples from African countries, from Asian countries, and so on. They just answered, no, we are the other country, we have different people, we have different realities. No, it will not work in our realities. So it was very important to convince the first region. that implemented, and then to showcase their results to other regions. And it was very useful. And the second thing that is very important in my view is to show effects. So it's very important to measure effects, to make impact evaluation surveys and so on, so we can evidence not about number of projects and number of people, so we can have these institutional effects about changing in mind of population.
And just to mention about results and measuring things, that when I said the City of Melbourne have got very explicit declarations about participation, they've included performance measurement, KPIs, they've made that measurable, so we can see what happens. Yeah.
So building on that, someone said we need more Brunos. Well, actually, we need local Brunos as well to go do those trips. And Yves' point about telling the stories, gathering the examples, also locally, and showing effects. And tying back to the point to Peter's point about accountancy means telling a story. That actually, when we gather evidence, we're not just gathering numbers, we're doing it to tell this tale that this works and it makes a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, all good things must come to an end. But before we go into the closing bits, we do have one last pair of speakers and thinkers. Nelson Diaz and Lena Langlet. And so I'll ask you to, again, try to sum up your reflections on the conference and also the future. Where is all this headed? Oh, you have your own. And you also have your own. Yes. Oh my God, you guys are well prepared. Fantastic. Nelson?
You can start. Okay. Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Congratulations to the organization of this event. It was a very well organized, a great event, and thank you so much for inviting me to this moment. In my opinion, this conference confirms two main ideas. The first one is democracy in the world is experiencing a crisis of mistrust in institutions and in political class. This situation affects rich and poor countries all over the world, and elections are not enough to make democracy credible. So this, in my opinion, is one of the first ideas of this meeting. And the second one is PB, participatory budgets, lead a social and a political movement aims to qualifying and to improve democratic systems. PB are very popular in different countries and have great impacts in administrations, in society, and territories, but the confidence that the PB generate, it's not so strong in the system. That's my opinion. PB are a path still under construction, and participatory democracy is a process of permanent conquest, and we need to continue investing our resources and our energies in this way, in building a new spaces of participation. Meetings like this, in my opinion, are very important to understand that we are not alone in the world, and to charge our batteries to still continue this work. We have 30 years of PB in the world, but we must think on the next 30 years. We must think on the future. And it's time to start to imagine PB during the next 30 years. We need more to focus on the future than on the past of these processes. I think it's time for that. And I would like to leave for this some challenges for this future, if you don't mind. As Yves told before, create an international agenda, a political international agenda on PB, continue to extend the territorial and institutional levels of participatory budgets, build multi-level PB with different levels of government, integrate PB with other participatory processes to enlarge and to create integrated systems of participation, find a relationship between PB and the new forms of artificial intelligence, because the world is going to be different in the future, and we need to understand that, and create legislation on participatory budget and participation, and I think this is the moment for that. To imagine how we can create legislation at national levels. And the last challenge I would like to share with you, it's the necessity that I feel to articulate PB, this movement of participatory budget, with other important and political social movements in the world. For example, with Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations, with transparency movements, with environment movements, human rights movements, urban agriculture movements, cultural movements, intercultural movements. So we have a lot of agendas, and we need to integrate these agendas in one only agenda at international level. Future of PB is tomorrow, and we have a lot of work to do, so we must we need to continue this work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's a good summary of some of the key challenges that we face in the future. And we've all, as you said, it's not this way of working is not new. This has a substantial history, and we've come a long way. But you've outlined that there are many things that still need to be developed. So, as you said, it's a very good realization that we get when we come to these gatherings, that we are not alone, and that we have allies across the world for those changes that you outlined. Lena?
Well, I'm going to take some Swedish perspective of this conference. And you know, Aladdin have 3 wishes, but I have 4. I start with that I want to have new researchers in the future. We have in our project look around in Sweden for researchers that are really interesting of what we do. And it have been very, very hard to find them. We have looked at political science, and you know, when I look at them, I see them sit in their glass tower and send out questionnaires and ask hundreds of questions to people, and they don't even reflect over which people are it that answer this questionnaire. Maybe people don't even understand the questions. And then they look at the fact and cherry pick the things that make their views be the right thing. And then they even say, you are wrong. The democracy in Sweden is fabulous. And we that work on the local level, we know that that's not true. Not really true. We have a strong democracy, but we have our challenge. And you know, we struggle. And 5 years ago, we looked at another view, and we find Hans. Hans, where are you? There. And you know, he's not in the political science area. He's in the global political stuff, yeah. And he worked with peace and conflicts. And I say I fall in love. That's true. He really connects to people. He's out there and meet refugees. He's out there and meet people with no place to live. He speaks to politicians on national level, the government. He speaks to politicians and civil servants on local level. And he have helped us a lot in our project to connect the trends, the global trends, and our work in practice. So I wish for researcher. I want to duplicate Hans. so we have a lot of him. Because I need researchers, as you have in a lot of other countries, that connect practical doing to what you say? Theory. Yeah. So that's my first wish. New researcher that's really dig in what we do in practice. The next thing I wish for is new politicians. You know, that's just a frame. I think when I go to the election in September, I go to the ballot box. I don't think I vote for politicians that should decide over me. I vote for politicians that want to listen to me. And I think my fellow citizens think the same. So if the politicians think that they should stay in their house and decide over me, I think we can skip democracy. Because then we could have dictatorship. So I think that's very important that we talk about power. The new form of power. The form of power that I wish for, sharing power. And when we talk about sharing power, and I talk about it, it's not that you give away power or lose power. It's about sharing and do together. And that's what I think we need to look at. And that's what kind of politician, the politician that's really expect and want to sharing power to make the city or the society more powerful, that's the politician I will vote for in September. The next thing I want to have is new professionals. I think that the municipality and region in Sweden need to have a new profession. They need to have people inside their organization that really work and help the politician to develop and care about democracy and citizen participation. So I can see some trends that we're going to have this. So more and more municipalities really have that kind of people inside their organization. But this is a really challenge. We need people that are really good at it so that people can feel included. And I think that's what I want for new professionals inside our organization. And the last one, I want new citizens. Can you say that? Perhaps not. But a couple of days ago, we have a Nordic network, and I meet Danish people. And the Danish people said that they have done research in Denmark, and the result was that people feel the connection to municipality and regions that they are just customers. The organization had nothing to do with democracy. They are customers, and I can see the same trend in Sweden. You go into the municipal store and buy your welfare. And you expect to have exactly that you want. In the right day, in the right place, exactly that you want. And I think we need to facilitate and make it possible for people to be citizen again. To understand that we need to prioritize, to understand that we need to work together to make a good society. And that's why I think that we, municipality and people, politicians and civil servants, really could work with how could we help citizens to be citizens and not just customers on welfare. So that was my thought about what we need.
Thank you. Well, 4 simple requests, really, when you think about it. But for me, I think, Lena, that also ties back to this thing which seems to be a common thread about humility. There is this saying that if you point the finger at someone else, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. and that oftentimes sort of researchers may point to practitioners and say, you're doing it wrong. And practitioners will point to politicians and saying, you're doing it wrong, and et cetera, et cetera. And actually, this is difficult for everyone. But I think you've highlighted some of the really important changes that we need to see. So thank you both very much for your input. A round of applause, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson.
And I would just like to acknowledge here the incredible work that Lena and Anders and SALAR in general have done. I said when I moved from Sweden to work in democracy participation in England, no one knew what I was doing. And today, a lot of people know what this is. Not everyone agrees with it, but at least we have the new challenge of persuading them. This is a real thing which is developed very quickly. And it wouldn't have happened in that way without the hard work that you've done. No. So I want to say a big thank you and acknowledgement to that.
And I would say it's a real honor for us to have all you here in the room, all the international guests, all the Swedish people that are here. And I hope that we're still working to connect and learn from each other. And you know, the guys from Sweden, but even the others of you, you know that you can contact me, Anders, Nils, Malin. Where is Malin? Malin and Anna-Karin. Yeah. And we will support you in the best way we can. And you can reach out and meet us whenever you want. So.
And this was our way to sort of sum up 10 years of working with participation with this conference. And now we are so eager to know who will take the challenge to arrange the Improving Democracy 2019. It's up to you.
Yeah. In the international.
Which country are we coming to next year?
Yeah.
Who will take it? Take it for the next year. That will be very interesting. So it's an open challenge. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming here and taking part in the discussions. And as we heard about the conversations and comments and so on, a lot of you have a good thoughts with your home. And I think it was Shari who said we need to tell our stories. So get home, tell the stories from the conference and from all of the parts of the world. And we will get back to you on our website with documentations from this conference and videos that we have, Eric have helped us to make. So there will be a continuing couple of weeks and months with the information.
Yeah. And now it's lunchtime.
It's lunchtime, and with lunch we say thank you and goodbye.